Wagwan everybody. Today we'll go through all the gang relations in GTA Vice City, every beef, every alliance, and each one described in detail. What was it about, between which gangs obviously, and how it started and ended if relevant. We'll more or less stick to the chronological order apart from the asset missions, which we'll cover at the end. And just a little notice for those who plan to watch the whole video without skipping anything. I'm sorry if some of the threads and information will be said multiple times, but that's for people who only need to watch selected chapters so they can still get all the info they need. However, I'll do my best to abstract each time the thread is discussed multiple times to make this watchable for everyone. Now, let's get going. Vance Crime Family and Forelli Mafia Alliance. Vance Crime Family were a pretty big time gang in Vice City back in 1984, led by the Vance brothers, Victor and Lance. However, by 1986, during the events of GTA Vice City, they didn't seem to have any businesses in Vice City. In fact, in 1984, after the gang got rid of all of their enemies, the brothers planned to leave Vice City and lay low for a while.
Hey, listen. Now that things are straight with Diaz, we should get out of town or lay low for a little while, you know? Yeah, you're right!
According to the VCBI records, by 1986, the gang was limited to 2 members, Lance and Vic. Also in 1986, Victor and Lance were back at Vice City in order to sell 20 kilograms of cocaine to the Forelli Mafia, an Italian criminal organization run by Sonny Forelli and based prominently in Liberty City, but by the time of GTA Vice City, they were conducting an expansion to Florida, which was to be started by the already mentioned drug deal with the Vance brothers, which was set up thanks to the Mafia's contact in Florida in the shape of a lawyer called Ken Rosenberg. Not only the deal was set up, but also the parties of the deal were set up during the deal by unknown to both parties at the time assassins. Not only the merchandise and the money was stolen, but also Victor Vance was killed, which was the nail to the gang's coffin, as we can't call one person a gang, especially if that person is Lance. Therefore, any later partnership of Tommy and Lance until the takeover of Diaz's do not count as a gang relation, just to be clear. Vance Crime Family versus Diaz Gang. Diaz Gang was a gang based in Starfish Island, run by Ricardo Diaz, which was mainly known for cocaine distribution. In 1986, the Vance Crime Family and the Forelli Mafia arranged a drug deal in the docks of Vice City. Diaz managed to find out about the deal via Gonzalez, the right-hand man of Colonel Cortez, who was one of the main people involved in setting up the deal for the Forellis. Diaz, since he knew that if this goes successfully, the Mafia will be in a position to create competition for his operation, in order to not let that happen, he got Mr. Black's hitmen to interrupt the deal and intercept the goods. As a result, Victor Vance was killed, and that was the ultimate end of the Vance Crime Family. Granted, Lance, the other co-leader of that gang, later got revenge on Diaz for killing his brother, but again, we cannot call one man a gang, so that simply don't count. Diaz Gang versus Forelli Mafia. And the third gang relation exposed in the very intro of the game is the conflict between the Diaz Gang and the Forelli Mafia. But this one actually extends further than just the first mission, but from the first mission we need to start. The Forelli Mafia and the Vance Crime Family organized the drug deal in 1986. Diaz, who was at the time the biggest player in the drug market in Vice City, having found out about it from his snitch, Gonzalez, sent assassins to mash up the deal and steal the goods. This action thwarted the Forelli's plans because the 20 kilos that the Mafia's representative, Tommy Vercetti, was meant to acquire in the deal were meant to be a head start for him to kick off the drug selling operation in Vice City. Hence, Vercetti's boss, upon finding out what happened at the deal, ordered him to retrieve the stolen drugs or the money, ideally both. The Mafia though did not know who ambushed the deal, didn't know that it was Diaz, so Vercetti began an investigation. First, by going to a party held by Colonel Cortez on his yacht. Tommy did not find out much, but actually Diaz very subtly exposes his responsibility for the deal interruption at that party in these words.
Our business is very trying. Barbarians at the gate. A time for rewarding one's friends and liquidating one's enemies, amigo.
In my opinion, the barbarians at the gate refers to the Forellis knocking on the gate to the drug market in Vice City, and then Diaz says that he liquidated his enemies, in other words, iced the deal in Viceport. Tommy didn't give up there, and soon he got a lowdown on a certain chef named Leo Teal that apparently was involved in this mess. Tommy accidentally kills him, failing to find out anything. I am mentioning that because, as it later turns out, Teal was not only working for the hitman company of Mr. Black, which Diaz got to mash up the transaction, but was also finding Diaz the customers for his drugs. So Tommy, by killing him, technically deals damage to Diaz's gang. Now, even though Tommy later in the story goes on and kills Diaz, I am not going to include that. Similarly to Lance and his gang, Tommy's actions past the mission Riot do not count as the actions taken on the account of the Forelli Mafia. See, in the mission Riot, Tommy cuts a deal with Avery Carrington that in exchange for Tommy's help in Avery's business, Carrington's gonna get rid of Sonny's delegation that were on their way to Vice City to supervise Tommy's investigation.
Son, you help me, and any greaseballs giving you a hard time, I'll see to it they take a long dirt nap.
Okay, what could I do for you?
This delivery comes.
Tommy's consent to killing him shows us that he no longer sees himself as a part of the Forellis, so any of his actions against Diaz past that point can't be included as a part of the discussed beef. But there is one more thing worth mentioning, that maybe isn't a direct action taken by one of the parties, but rather a reference to this conflict in the game. It's in the auto side mission for Mr. Black. In it, the person on the phone that gives us the job details says this.
Mr. Teal, your help in eradicating those out-of-towners was invaluable to business.
This is another indirect reference to the deal, with the out-of-towners being the Forellis and the business being Diaz's operation. Diaz Gang and Cubans alliance. The Cubans were obviously a Cuban gang, holding their turf in Little Havana and run by Humberto Robina. In the Guardian Angels mission, Tommy Vercetti is being asked by Juan Cortez to oversee a deal between the Cubans and Diaz's gang. We can't tell what exactly was the item of the deal, but we can pretty much tell that the Cubans were paying money to Diaz, and looking at Diaz's business, there was like a 99.9% chance that he was selling them coke. Additionally, there is a bit more to say about this alliance. Humberto Robina was actually connected also with Leo Teal, one of the hitmen of Mr. Black and a person who was finding Diaz the buyers for his coke. It turns out that Teal was also running errands for Humberto Robina himself. On a side note, another interesting thing about this deal is that the drugs that Diaz sells to Cubans, presuming that it was drugs, are likely to be the same drugs stolen from Tommy at the deal at the beginning of the game, or a part of it at least. Because not long after the Viceport transaction, Tommy kills Teal and snatches his phone. He receives a call from one of Teal's co-workers telling him that they have to find a buyer for Diaz's merchandise.
Hey, Leo, I think we got a buyer for Diaz's merchandise. You gotta give him a ring, man. Set up the deal, you know?
Where are you now?
You okay, Leo? You sound kinda different.
Just tell me where you are.
Who the hell is this? Put Leo on, man.
Leo's gone away for a while. He left me in charge.
Screw you, man.
Now remember that Teal was also working for the Cubans, and of course he could not have connected Diaz and the Cubans because he was kinda dead, but it wouldn't be wild to assume that if he was working for the Cubans, his co-workers probably also had contacts in that gang, and they could have made a connection. Diaz Gang versus Haitians. The Haitians were a Haitian gang, holding their turf in Little Haiti, and were most likely run by Auntie Poulet. In the mission Guardian Angels, Diaz presumably offloaded some drugs to the Cubans. The exchange was taking place near Ocean Beach and was attacked by the Haitians, who eventually failed to get anything out of this deal and were all killed off by Diaz's guards. That is the only act of this conflict in the game. Cubans versus Haitians. Undoubtedly the biggest gang war in the game. The Haitians' beef with the Cubans has been going on for long before the events of GTA Vice City, but it escalated during the game's story. But before this conflict reached its crescendo, there was one more minor encounter. It came in the mission Guardian Angels, in which the Haitians tried to intercept the goods during the exchange between Ricardo Diaz and the Cubans. This attempt failed horribly though. Anyway, soon a property magnate, Avery Carrington, asked Tommy Vercetti to kill the new leader of the Haitians at the funeral of the previous one, disguised as a member of the Cuban gang, in order to artificially initiate a serious conflict between the two organizations. It was done for the purpose of lowering the real estate prices in the area affected by the gang war, as a gang conflict makes a neighborhood dangerous and the life situations and businesses of the people living in it unstable and uncertain. Therefore, people don't want to live in such an area and often sell their properties for a reduced price in an act of desperation. Avery wanted to capitalize on that tendency and therefore initiated a conflict between the Cubans and the Haitians. Then the Cubans conducted an assault on the Haitians' drug factory, killing many of their members in the process and stealing some of their merchandise. After that, Umberto sent Tommy Vercetti to yet again steal the drugs off the Haitians, this time by interrupting their exchange with the Sharks. Also, Auntie Poulet had to relocate the hiding place of her suspicious voodoo stuff after the Cubans told the police that it was drugs and where she hiding them. The Haitians were not just watching back and taking everything on the chin though, they did hit back. Poulet used her magic voodoo techniques, or whatever it is, to sort of hypnotize Tommy and used him to do some damage to the Cubans. She first got him to destroy the boats that the Cubans were using to transport drugs by water. And then there was a big ass fight going on in Little Haiti between the two gangs, but the rule was that neither side is allowed to use guns. Although Poulet got Tommy to take a sniper rifle, get up on the nearby roof and help the Haitians cheat their way to victory by shooting at the Cuban soldiers. And finally, the Cubans, thanks to pulling off a truly genius and well thought through deception that was about driving into the Haitian drug factory in Haitian voodoos so nobody realizes that it's actually the Cubans trying to get into the facility. Ignore that the Cubans were dressed in their gang outfits and that their skin color was completely not matching.
Okay, in you go.
They managed to plant bombs inside the factory, escape and then blow up the whole place, thereby stamping their authority over the Haitians. This probably did not end the conflict completely, but definitely put the Cubans as the dominant side, and the Haitians must have been scared to try and hurt them ever since. Diaz and Sharks Alliance. Sharks are a pretty small time gang in 1986. Their main base is located in the ruins of the former Mendez cartel mansion at Prawn Island. The leader of this gang is unknown. There seemed to be a business partnership between them and Diaz's gang. Apparently, they were paying a percentage of some profits back to Ricardo Diaz. It's safe to assume that it was a simple pattern. Diaz was Shark's supplier, and they had to give him back a portion of the profits from the distribution of Diaz's product. This partnership ended in the mission The Chase, but we'll talk about that in the next chapter. Diaz Gang versus Sharks. As said in the previous chapter, Diaz was Shark's supplier before the mission The Chase. In that mission, we find out that Ricardo is pissed off because the Sharks wanted to reduce the percentage that they have to pay Diaz by 3%. Diaz found it insulting and sent Tommy Vercetti to follow one of the members of the Sharks in order to find out where they keep the money. Then Diaz gets Tommy and Lance Vance to go to the ruins at Prawn Island, kill the Sharks gangsters and rob them for all the money they got. The Sharks did not cause no problems for Diaz from that point on. Diaz Gang versus Cubans. This one is actually pretty weird, as we know that Diaz's gang and the Cubans were on good terms. Yet, in the supply and demand mission, they are competing against each other for the cargo offered by a certain freelancer, who each month sells his merchandise to the first buyer who reaches his yacht. Tommy and Lance, on the orders of Ricardo, get to the dealer first and collect the cargo. And then they are being chased and shot at by the Cubans, who also wanted to get their hands on the stuff. Tommy kills everyone following him and Lance, and they manage to secure the merchandise. Perhaps Diaz specifically asked Tommy and Lance to the dealer as they were not official members of his gang, so the Cubans would not realize that it's Ricardo's men who were shooting at him. On the other hand, we don't actually have to kill everyone following us as long as the boat gets to its destination in one piece, so they can clearly see us parking the boat next to Diaz's mansion, so it actually don't make that much sense. But this beef isn't continued in any way later in the story, so it was just a one-time stunt. Vercetti Gang and Cubans alliance. Now, I could describe everything that Tommy did for the Cubans and how he helped them win their war against the Haitians, but I'll handle it a bit differently. See, the moment in which we unlock the missions for Umberto is before Tommy takes over Diaz, which in turn is the moment in which the Vercetti Gang has been formed. Now, of course, you could complete the missions for the Cubans in whatever order you like. You could do them right after the mission 2-bit hit for Avery, or you could even do them after completing the whole story. That's why, for anything to make sense and to not say maybe or most likely, or to not need to split everything into a bajillion scenarios each time I talk about missions like that, I assume that the canonical order of the missions in GTA Vice City is the same as the order of unlocking the missions. And if one mission unlocks 2 different threads, the one that is not required to finish the story or is less main should be completed first. For example, the mission Jury Fury unlocks 2 other missions, Riot for Ken Rosenberg and Roadkill for Mr. Black. In that case, according to my canonical order, a player should complete Roadkill first, because that mission is unrequired to complete the story. In other words, to complete the mission, keep your friends close. And then the Riot mission, without which completing, we'd never unlock the final story mission. In our case, the mission Riot unlocks 3 missions: the fastest boat for Diaz, Sir Yes Sir for Cortez, and assuming we've completed Demolition Man, we also unlock 2-bit hit for Avery, which in turn unlocks the first mission for Umberto. Now, both the fastest boat and Sir Yes Sir are required to complete the story, while 2-bit hit is completely optional. Now, as I said, 2-bit hit unlocks the whole thread of the Cuban-Haitian war, including Tommy's work for Umberto. So according to my canonical order, a player should complete 2-bit hit, all the missions for the Cubans and the Haitians, ending on the Trojan Voodoo mission, before they complete Sir Yes Sir and the fastest boat. That being said, in my eyes, Tommy completes his work for Umberto before the Vercetti Gang has even been formed. So all I can say is that Tommy helped the Cubans in the past win the war against the Haitians, and that contribution turned into a gang alliance after the Rub-Out mission, when the Vercetti Gang was formed. There are absolutely no signs of that alliance in the game, it's just my assumption, but I feel like I should have mentioned it, plus the auditing could be useful for you in understanding other videos on my channel as well. Haitians and Sharks alliance. In the what the fuck is a mission? In the mission Naval Engagement, the Haitians were cutting a deal with the Sharks. Now this mission is kinda weird, as Umberto says that the Haitians are collecting some drug shipment, and in the actual mission we witness the Haitians exchange with the Sharks. The only way it makes sense to me is that the Haitians collected the shipment and immediately went to meet the Sharks, who presumably wanted to buy them drugs off them. This makes sense as this threat comes after the Sharks' fallout with Diaz, their previous supplier, so it's logical that they wanted to find a new one, and they found one in the Haitians, or they would have, had it not been for Tommy, who smashed the deal into pieces, killed everyone and stole the drugs and the cash for Umberto. Cubans versus Sharks. In the mission Naval Engagement, there is an exchange going on between the Sharks and the Haitians. It seems like the Sharks were buying drugs off the Haitians. The Cubans' leader, Umberto Robina, sent Tommy Vercetti to make sure the deal doesn't happen. Tommy does exactly that by killing all the Sharks and the Haitians and stealing the goods of the exchange. Vercetti Gang and the Bikers Alliance. After Tommy takes over Diaz's, Ken Paul asks him for help in a couple of things concerning the Love Fist heavy metal band. One of those things was to get the local biker gang to serve as protection for the band's concert in Vice City, as this would fit the overall vibe and would be very rock and roll. Anyway, that's how Tommy Vercetti, the leader of the Vercetti Gang, comes in contact with the leader of the bikers, Mitch Baker. Baker tells Tommy that he'd have to join their family for them to agree to run protection for the gig. So Tommy first proves to him that he can handle a bike well, then he conducts a World War VIII on the streets of Vice City for no sensible reason, and finally retrieves Baker's bike from the hands of the Sharks, thereby earning himself the respect of Mitch and starting a sort of an alliance with his gang. Bikers vs Sharks. In the mission Hog-Tied for Mitch Baker, we find out that Mitch's bike has been stolen by the Sharks over some machismo thing. I guess that the Sharks wanted to show the bikers that they have bigger cojones than the bikers by stealing one of their vehicles. And yes, that is the most stupidest beef in this video. Unless I don't understand how the gangs work, but you know, I thought that it was always more about the money than machismo. I may be wrong, I'm not a gangster myself, so I can only guess. In any case, Tommy goes to Sharks lockup, kills a whole lot of them, finds the bike and returns it to Mitch. The end. Vercetti Gang vs Forelli Mafia. After Tommy does not fulfill his promise to retrieve Sonny's money and refuses to give a percentage of his profits to the Forellis, as was initially agreed, at some point Sonny's had enough of waiting and sent his men to Vice City to take the money from Vercetti by force. Tommy is not very happy with that and manages to kill the collectors and get his money back. Then in turn, Sonny was not happy because of Tommy capping his men, so he decided to fly to Vice City himself with an entire army of his goons to ask Tommy for the money face to face, hoping that he'd get scared, I guess. Tommy though still did not fancy paying the Forellis, so he made a genius plan to give Sonny fake money and send him back home with it. What this plan was meant to achieve is unknown to me. I mean, I think there's little doubt that Sonny would quickly realize that the money is fake and then he would return to Vice City, only for a bit of a different purpose. Not to politely ask Tommy for the slice of the cake, but rather to shoot him in the head and take the entire cake for himself. And of course, Tommy's gang was powerful, but was it as powerful as the Forelli Mafia at the time? Well, I don't think so. Paradoxically, the betrayal of Tommy's friend, Lance Vance, saved him from all that. See, Sonny convinced Lance to betray Tommy and join him. Lance agreed since he didn't like being patronized by Tommy on a non-stop basis and exposed his brilliant deception before Sonny took off. That led to a spectacular encounter where Tommy was up against Sonny, Lance and the entire army of Forelli soldiers. It's obviously logical that Tommy won that battle, as he definitely wasn't outnumbered by his opponents by any means. Tommy, by killing Sonny, put an end to his connections with the Mafia and therefore the beef between his gang and the Forellis. Vercetti Gang vs Vice City Triads and the Counterfeiting Syndicate. In one of the asset threads, Printworks more precisely, Tommy wants to start printing money. He finds out from Paul, his informant, that the Triads are supplying the plates to the Counterfeiting Syndicate. Tommy needed to intercept the next shipment of the plates in order to use them to print his own money. He went to the docks where the Triads had a shipping company called Chartered Libertine Lines, killed a whole lot of security guards or members of the Triads, located the shipping officer who turned out to be a bit of a pushy-o and squealed about everything without a bigger fuss. So Tommy found out where the next shipment is coming in. Soon he managed to intercept this shipment from the hands of the Syndicate, killing a lot of its members in the process and getting the plate, which allowed him to start his own counterfeiting operation. And that would be that for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like it, and if you enjoy watching the content on my channel in general, I'd be grateful if you also subscribed. If you're curious about the details of the beef between Vercetti and the Forelli Mafia, I recommend you watch the video I made on this subject that is displayed on the screen for you right now. Meanwhile, thank you for watching. Respect.